A lot of people get stuck here because they don't know where to go, how to do it. It sounds very complicated, but it's not. With that being said, I want to give you a streamlined approach to getting you from zero to launch. Over time, you're going to learn how to really become a good engineer with your audio.
This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 157. In this episode, I'm going to share with you the fastest ways to start, launch, and grow your podcast. If you've already got the gear, you're halfway there. So you're ready to hit record and commit? Let's get started. Let's talk about the quick start essentials. So you've got your microphone, your headphones, and maybe even a mixer. Well, that's perfect. You're ready to go. Here's a fun fact. According to Buzzsprout, there is over 2 million podcasts out there, but only about 720,000 are active. That means consistency is key. Now, I want to talk about outlining your podcast plan in 3 easy steps. Number 1, define your niche and audience. Know who you're speaking to and why you're passionate about it. Number 2, craft a compelling title and description. Make it catchy and SEO friendly. I think one of the most important areas of your podcast that you should focus on is your titles. If they stand out and they grab the attention, that's really going to boost your viewership. Remember, you want to pull them in, but make sure that your titles are relevant to what you're speaking about in your episode, or you're going to mislead your audience, and they're never going to come back. Number 3, set up your recording space. Find a quiet spot, test your gear, and ensure good sound quality. In previous episodes, I talk about building out your podcast studio, things you need like sound padding, and little tips and tricks that I use to really dampen the bounce of the room reverb from when you're speaking. So be sure to explore those previous episodes. Now let's talk about recording and editing like a pro. Yes, you will get there. You will eventually become so good at what you do with your podcast because you'll know all the buttons, what they do, all the editing tools, how they work, and what fits best for you and makes you sound the best. So I want you to get excited about that because it's time to learn. With that being said, I want to give you a streamlined approach to getting you from zero to launch. Number 1, just press record. Don't overthink it. Start with a short introduction and your main topic. Number 2, edit for quality. Use tools like Audacity or GarageBand. Cut out mistakes, add intros and outros, and balance your audio levels the best you can. Over time, you're going to learn how to really become a good engineer with your audio. So stick with me because I have all the tools, strategies, and information to help you get there. Number 3, add music and sound effects. Make your podcast dynamic and engaging. Just like our swoosh sound effects, make sure that you're finding really exciting sounds that fit your podcast. You can license these sounds or music, or you can find them in the free libraries online. You'll just have to search around. Now, I want to talk about publishing and promoting your podcast. A lot of people get stuck here because they don't know where to go, where to publish, how to do it. It sounds very complicated, but it's not. So let's just say you have your first episode ready. Well, it's time to publish and promote it. Number 1, choose a hosting platform. Podbean and Spotify for podcasters are great options. They'll distribute your podcast to major directories. Number 2, submit to directories. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Get on as many platforms as possible. And this is very easy inside the dashboards of platforms like Spotify for podcasters. Number 3, promote on social media. Share snippets, engage with listeners, and use relevant hashtags. When doing this, I highly recommend using Headliner to create engaging audiograms to share on your social media. If you're loving the tips so far, make sure to subscribe to the Podcast in the Rough on Apple Podcasts or head over to thepodcastintherough.com to choose your favorite platform. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe right now. Now let's talk about growing your audience. Growing your audience takes time, but here are some tips to help you speed up the process. Number 1, consistent schedule. Release episodes regularly. Consistency builds trust. I recommend a weekly podcast. Number 2, engage with your audience. Respond to comments, ask for feedback, and create a community. Really get involved. Number 3, collaborate with others. Guest spots, interviews, and cross promotions can really expand your reach. And I highly recommend starting out with getting some guest interviews under your belt. It's the fastest way to grow as a host, understand how your podcast will work, and really give you that boost you need to grow your audience by sharing and engaging with others who might have a following. And there you have it, the fastest way to start, launch, and grow your podcast. Remember, the journey of 1,000 episodes begins with a single record button. And again, if you found this episode helpful, please make sure to subscribe to the Podcast in the Rough and leave a rating and review. That'll help me reach more people and let them know how they can start to podcast from start to success. And if you'd like to dive a little bit deeper, I highly recommend visiting thepodcastintherough.com/learn and getting involved in my podcast community mastermind group, where I deep dive on all the things you need to really grow, expand, and make your podcast profitable. So definitely check that out. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Podcast in the Rough. Until next time, keep those mics hot and those ideas flowing. This is the Podcast in the Rough.